This is Sg2 Perspectives, a weekly conversation between the Sg2 intelligence team and industry thought leaders about the biggest trends in healthcare. We're happy you joined us today. Enjoy the episode.
There's a capacity play here. It might not be a cost thing, it might not be a payer pressure response thing, but we have limited capacity in our AMC flagship. It's full of low and medium acuity patients. We need to move them out so we can backfill with cases that are more appropriate for a flagship AMC facility, the quaternary tertiary cases that belong in our main OR.
Welcome to Sg2 Perspectives. I'm your host, Trevor DaRin. Joining me today is my colleague, Tony Guth, which, as many of you are familiar with hearing from Tony, means we're going to be talking about ambulatory surgery center strategy. Today, we're going to be talking specifically about some of the unique challenges academics face in that space. Tony, you and I worked together recently on some of this work. We've got to talk to a pretty big group of academics, diverse challenges, but a lot of patterns too. Why don't you start with some of the universal struggles that really aren't unique to academics that everyone's going to face, community hospital, academic, whoever, when trying to pursue and deploy ambulatory surgery centers?
Yeah, Trevor. So the universal challenge for our health system members is that historically, most surgery has been taking place in their hospitals, but that's been changing over the past 5, 10, 15 years, and in some markets faster than others. The challenge is that as these cases move out of the hospital, they are going to freestanding ASCs, facilities that these health systems, our members, don't own. It's one thing to get dinged in reimbursement if the case moves from inpatient to outpatient status, but still in your hospital. It's another thing for these cases to move out of the hospital to a freestanding ASC. So that's the universal challenge here, regardless of health system type of hospital type. These surgical cases that they've owned are moving. That loss of share creates a destabilizing cycle because we still rely on surgery along with pharmacy, but also surgery to keep our mission alive. We need to make a margin, and surgery plays a role in that. As we lose share in surgery, we lose our hospital outpatient department volume in turn, and our margin gets squeezed, and it's harder to subsidize these loss-leading services that we need to do as a community health system, and our brand and community connection weakens, and it's just this destabilizing cycle that we need to get out of. That's something that we work with our members right now is if we are still trying to figure out our ASC strategy, what it looks like, and to what degree we actually make this investment.
Perfect setup. And it showed me there's a lot more that's unique to academics than universal challenges. I think for academics, their historic hospital and hospital campus centricity is just naturally a challenge when they try to expand any ambulatory strategy, any site that's off campus. We'll talk more about that. Faculty practice model. You could say it's just different, but it also presents unique challenges. Some as basic as the distribution of clinical and research and teaching time when now there's travel time baked into that an alternate site, all the way up through how physicians feel incented to move cases there. Bigger than that, but feels close, is academics' general approach to partnerships, not universal, but more academics are more apprehensive about partnerships and joint ventures. Or at least they don't have the institutional muscle memory. And we've heard plenty of them admit their philosophy going into a partnership is we will be the leading partner from a knowledge perspective and from a control perspective. That's not usually how ambulatory surgery centers work, especially when you're paying for the operational expertise. Staffing can be totally different outside of just the surgeon. And then this one's a little tougher to measure, but it also seems they're feeling less payer pressure to be an early mover in the market. Maybe that's because of how essential many academics are to payers' networks. Maybe it's just that they have pushed back more and been more reluctant to move. But we haven't heard about payer pressure as a big driver as academics think about the shift to ASC. How do some of them connect? Why is the combination of these factors make it so much harder for academics to invest in ambulatory surgery centers?
The first thing you mentioned, that AMCs are hospital-centric by nature, that's a big one. It's difficult for AMCs to get in the mindset of investing in a space that they're not super familiar with. The question we get a lot is, why would I cannibalize for myself? Why would I move these cases out when our staff, our faculty, our surgeons enjoy doing them in the hospital, when they're hard to convince to do them, on the other side of town in a new facility? Why do this? What's really helpful, Trevor, is when we show AMCs their inpatient case mix, their inpatient portfolio of patients, and you just show them how many patients are what we would consider low, medium acuity patients. It's not just medical patients, but surgical patients as well. There's a lot of low acuity stuff still done in AMCs. And yeah, you're right. This was kind of surprising, but I agree with you. There wasn't a whole lot of payer pressure with the AMCs we talked to moving cases off campus. But regardless, there's a capacity play here. It might not be a cost thing. It might not be a payer pressure response thing, but we have limited capacity in our AMC flagship. It's full of low and medium acuity patients. We need to move them out so we can backfill with cases that are more appropriate for a flagship AMC facility, the quaternary tertiary cases that belong in our main OR.
We'll come back to that. I like it. There's a softer piece, too, of the hospital centricity. Academics are very political organizations. It makes it even harder to take a set of specialists and say, a few of you are going to do some of your cases in this alternate setting because the downtown hospital campus has been the flagship. It's been the center of action for so long. We can't discount that. It's a big piece of why someone would choose to be in academic medicine because you do want that lifestyle environment, et cetera. And so discounting and say, okay, now your days are going to be spent here. It's going to feel like you're not as connected to your peers, like you're just like any other specialist working in a ambulatory center, kind of goes against what practices look like. And that specialty chose to be in academic medicine. So I think it's a little bit delicate. And that gets into how the faculty practice models makes this just a little tricky.
I'd agree. Folks who want to work for an AMC are looking for what an AMC has to offer, and maybe the expectation isn't to do most of the cases in a lower cost ASC setting. You want to be in the flagship hospital. It's partly that, but it's also workflow as well. AMCs are especially susceptible to the changes in workflow. Academic surgeons may be more likely to resist off-campus ASCs because it just disrupts their day. Parking, travel, unfamiliar equipment in the ORs, probably more affordable equipment. Probably don't have the robot that you like. Time away from clinic or academic space. This is something we heard in our interviews. It's making it as easy as possible for faculty to do these cases in this newer location that's not the AMC flagship hospital.
Tony, totally agree. One of the things that jumped out to me that we heard is one system talk about moving office space for some specialists, for some specialties to the same building that the ambulatory surgery center's in. And they acknowledged how helpful that was in getting momentum and making it feel easy and natural for those specialists. And then they acknowledged we can't do that for everyone that we want to do surgery in these sites today, much less the portion of surgery we hope takes place there 5 or 10 years from now. It's a solve. Maybe it's a Band-Aid. Maybe it's a carrot or option for a few specialists, but it's not going to be universal. The other thing I don't think we heard from any is sharing equity with faculty members. And when we did talk about it, those answers were very short. Nope, we're not doing it and we're not considering it.
Yeah, that's right. It's hard to get it done in a way that's abiding by regulations and the law, also keeping the peace amongst the other faculty members. Even the non-AMC health systems we talked to have trouble giving equity to employed docs. It's very, very hard to do. The most common way is to find those independent groups and split it with them, do a JV with them, make sure that they have equity in the space. The answers were short. There was a no, we're not doing that. It's not possible. We need to find a way around it.
They were even shorter than that because they didn't end with we need to find a way around it. It was, we're not doing it and we have to make it work in this existing model. They weren't trying to get creative. They weren't thinking about other ways to compensate or think about productivity. I don't think we heard anything like that. It was mostly just a shut door.
You're right. The solutions would go back to, it was a shut door, but the way around it would be finding solutions like we just talked about, trying to make sure the surgeons are extremely comfortable in the space that they helped build, we're part of putting together.
Apprehension about JVs and partnerships feels similar to all that, but it's different. It's more of an institutional exercise than it is at the surgeon level. There's plenty of academics that have plenty of partnerships that are successful, but generally more academics are more apprehensive to move forward in partnerships than community hospitals. So overall, in a space where having an operating partner is so valuable, coming to the table and acknowledging we're not going to be good at this and we're going to need a partner is something that's just tough for academics. That's a sometimes hurdle, or at least something that in a space where often what we're measuring is how quickly systems and markets are moving, it's just made them move a little bit slower.
You're exactly right. The apprehension to maybe find a partner is keeping AMCs back and adopting ambulatory surgery. The hesitation is they want to own it themselves. They don't want to partner because they can, but they tend to run ASCs like an academic OR, which you don't want to do. These partnerships are incredibly important. An ambulatory surgery center OR is not the main OR in your flagship hospital. You need someone with the experience and the expertise. We talk about ASC growth and opportunities all the time, Trevor. These things fail all the time. and this is anecdotal, I don't have the data, but the most often failure scenario I've seen with an ASC is where a hospital, health system, AMC or otherwise, tries to go into the ASC space on their own. It's a 100% owned ASC, and they don't have a partner with the expertise. They didn't give 49% or whatever to a management company or independent physician group. They do it themselves. They run this facility like a hospital, and it goes under. This is the most common failure that I've seen. The most common success story I've seen is involving partnerships.
We've heard this exact quote, and you've probably heard it even more than me. We built an ASC, but nobody wanted to do cases there. That speaks to all the other complicating factors. You started to get there. What are some other keys to success that are not totally academic specific, but at least in the group we talked with, there was a couple things that popped as patterns to me. What'd you hear?
Yeah, maybe touching on what I said earlier about capacity, I think the biggest key to success is making sure that you have an ambulatory surgery strategy that is purposeful. For an AMC, the purpose is primarily to decant volume, low acuity volume out of your hospital so you can backfill it with the valuable quaternary, tertiary cases that everyone's competing for. AMCs in your region, but also even larger items that are starting to get into the game. The key to success is being cognizant and purposeful as you build these ASCs or partner to build these ASCs. What's going in there? Which cases are leaving our hospital? Who are the surgeons doing those cases? Do they want to move those cases? Are they actually bought in? And how do we have a purposeful backfill? They're easier to do in markets that are growing, but even in markets that aren't growing, if it's done with intent and with data-driven strategic planning, you can find those cases that belong in the hospital, chase after them, and then backfill in a meaningful way.
I'm going to go a step further. It might not even be just a key to success. It might be an advantage for academics because most of them are already pretty good at knowing and understanding if we create capacity, what can we backfill it with and how to make it as tertiary and quaternary as possible. We've seen that in community hospital partnerships and work they've all done on capacity already. And it syncs really well with helping the health system's financial goals and helping the way, at least most, painting with broad strokes here, surgeons in academic want to practice. Oh, great. We can shift a few lower acuity cases out, and that means I get to do more complex surgeries in the hospital. Great. This fits really well.
Exactly. And someone we talked to, I like the word they used, but they said a few years ago, before they invested in ASC, surgeons were squawking about OR access. Like it's the main OR is full. And the why, the strategic purpose behind the ASC was clear. After these things got up and running, you didn't really hear complaints about block time or operating time or capacity. You hadn't heard those in a few years. So that's a sign of good news. That's a sign that this is actually executing on the strategy that it's meant to execute on.
That's a bullseye. Thanks for reminding me of that. The other key to success, which was less universal than focusing on capacity, systems were in different places in their journey around this, but thinking about ASCs from a cost efficiency mindset and saying, how are we going to make decisions about who are the best candidates for surgery here? Of course, it's going to be about patient safety and quality. With that in mind, do we also bring in, after that, cost efficiency as an option? We have very expensive hospital-based resources. Well, if there's patients we know we're not going to make money on, how do we think about the lowest cost setting is the best for our health system, especially if all else is equal from a patient perspective, and knowing that most patients consider it more convenient to be out and home as fast as possible. That definitely wasn't universal. I'd say systems were kind of big distribution in where they are, but most acknowledged that they were on that journey. Is that what you heard?
Yeah, I'd agree. Not universal. It's very self-aware to hear a health system, an AMC specifically, talk about the idea of moving cases out because it's extremely costly to take care of them in the hospital, rather than this is maybe something we can make a profit on in the ambulatory setting. They feel like two different sides of the same coin, but they're very different connotation and strategic purpose. But yeah, I think you nailed it. We don't hear it too often, but it's a reality that you want these ASCs to make a profit, but also you want what's left in the hospital to be keeping the health system alive as well. So well said.
Do you think that's a pushback on our encouragement to have ambulatory as kind of its own P&L?
Yeah, and all that stuff. We've been talking about that for a while. I think the big takeaway that Sg2 is trying to get across for the past couple of years is that the ambulatory business unit as a whole, basically everything not in the hospital, should be able to stay afloat on its own. It should be in the black. Like if your hospital's disappeared tomorrow and you only have your ambulatory assets, you should still be in business. So yeah, no, that does challenge that perspective, right, Trevor? We can't get around the fact that our hospitals are still a large part of our business as a health system, especially for an academic medical center. So it would be naive to think that this can happen overnight. The fact that the ambulatory business unit has its own P&L, even if it was possible to measure costs in that way, it stays margin positive. It's just hard to do. But you're right. This thinking of maybe moving the high cost procedures out of the hospital to an ASC, knowing that maybe you're not going to make the biggest margin out there, is okay so long as the backfill strategy is thought through and very clear and makes up the difference. It's ambiguous. There's no simple math to demonstrate if we move this from here, this is what the cost is going to be and what our reimbursement is going to be, and the volume is going to be this to make it off. It's not there. That's what we're calling like the old margin math. It's really hard to make that work. The new margin math is a little more holistic than that. What's also happening in the patient journey that's not surgery? Just a little out of the scope of today's conversation, but what's not surgical in this patient's journey that we need to be involved in that's not in the hospital? It's that new margin math. We need to make the whole patient journey high quality, profitable, that big patient satisfier.
Sorry to put you on the spot with that question. Tony, thanks as always for sharing your perspective. Another fun episode talking about healthcare strategy with you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Trevor.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sg2 Perspectives. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Sg2 if you have questions or suggestions for future episodes.